Welcome back to Pump Take Sports. Today in the hockey segment, we're going to be talking about the Tim Peel scandal and a little bit about the NHL officiating. But first, we're here with breaking news. The Buffalo Sabres have officially tied the 2003-2004 Pittsburgh Penguins for the longest losing streak in NHL history with 18 losses in a row. This comes after the Buffalo Sabres are just up 3-0 on the Philadelphia Flyers, who are also a little bit on a low streak too. And they ended up blowing that 3-0 lead, 4-3 in overtime, was it?
4-3 in overtime in Buffalo Sabres fashion.
Wow.
They tied the record in the most embarrassing way possible by choking a lead.
Yeah, here's to hoping they lose their next game so that record is all theirs, eh?
Please. I don't want them to share the record. I want it to be a solo record.
All right. So before we get deep into our officiating scandal talk that we're going to be doing, we're coming here to you today with the beer of the week, Innocent Gun Scotch Ale. This is one of my favorite treats. Does anyone out there that's watching here knows me well that this is one of my favorite treats. It is. Let me make sure that I'm correct in saying this. 6.6% alcohol content. And what makes this beer so tasty and delicious is the fact that it's brewed and aged in a Scotch barrel. So it gets a little Scottish liquor taste in it when you drink it. Let's crack these bad boys and cheers.
This is my first time having one of these.
Good stuff. Anyway.
Ooh, that is a tasty beer.
Yeah, it's a rich.
For those that watched last time, I deem myself pretty exclusive lager guy, occasionally a Pilsner, but for a Scottish ale, yeah, that's solid. I enjoy that.
All right, so let's move into a little bit of Tim Peel scandal action here. So for those of you that aren't aware, last week there was a bit of a scandal in the NHL where one of the referees in the Nashville Predators and Detroit Red Wings game was caught on a hot mic saying, quote, "It wasn't much, but I wanted to get a fucking penalty against Nashville early." Now, the context of what this quote meant is that early in the game, Tim Peel called a penalty on Detroit defenseman John Merrill for tripping, but it was a bit of a soft trip. And after they reviewed it later on in the game, it was kind of revealed that John Merrill embellished the trip a little bit. So essentially what Tim Peel's thought process here was that he wanted to sort of like do a makeup call and book Nashville to sort of like even the playing field a little bit. But what happened was he was caught on mic saying this out loud to another one of the referees, and it sent everyone up in arms about the NHL being rigged and the officials rigging games and attempting to favor certain teams and matchups. And what resulted in was Tim Peel ended up getting fired by the league, despite the fact that also Tim Peel was scheduled to retire at the end of the season anyway. But they had to fire him because of all the uproar about it, and it's been all over the news. What was your first take when you heard the clip, and also about your reaction that the NHL, the hockey world, had to the scandal?
So I was originally exclusively mad at Tim Peel because I didn't read too much into the situation. All I heard was that he basically admitted that he made a weak call on purpose just to even it up between the two teams. But after reading into it a little bit more and thinking about it, there is no chance that this doesn't happen around the league with every single referee. I think this is the way that they're taught. When the NHL brings refs into the league, I think this is the way that they're taught because for whatever reason, there's some sort of stigma around the refs where they believe that they have to call a game based on making it even between two teams instead of just calling it by the rule book. And to me, that's bullshit. Tim Peel, he got caught and he fell on the sword, but he shouldn't be the guy that we're mad at. We should be mad at the NHL, if anything. And there's proof of this. I was actually listening to the Steve Dangle podcast last week, and Adam Wilde, one of their hosts, made a great point. He went and looked at, I think it was like a collection of games from last Saturday until the following Tuesday. And in every single game, he looked at the list of the penalties called in every game. And I think of however many penalties there were, let's say an average of 5 to 6 penalties per game. there were only, I think, 1 or 2 games throughout this span of days where the amount of penalties between each team was lopsided. So most of the penalties called in these games throughout this span of like 4 or 5 days, it was either an even number of penalties or a spread of 1, which I think is bullshit. Because if you're a referee, I think you got to be calling games as opposed to you got to be calling games based on what the rulebook says, not trying to make it fair. Because sure, you might be trying to make something up for another. You might be trying to make something up for one of the teams. But if you're to go out there and call something shitty on purpose, all you're doing is fucking over the other team that you're trying to help. I don't know. I think it's complete bullshit. I think the NHL has to do an investigation into this and really rethink the way that they're teaching refs to call games, because this isn't a Tim Peel thing. This is a league-wide thing.
Yeah, there's certainly a systematic rule with the officiating in the NHL that certainly is a little bit flawed that allows this to happen. Here's my take on it. Anyone that watches hockey on a regular basis is familiar with the concept of makeup calls, right? Makeup calls, they have always been an unspoken reality in the NHL and across sports too. You see it in other sports leagues as well. But it was an unspoken reality. That's the word I wanted to emphasize here.
Yes.
Makeup calls were always there. You could always pick up on them if you were paying attention, but they were an unspoken reality that no one ever really acknowledged as being a systematic thing that was established in order to be able to even out hockey games. What Tim Peel did was he spoke of it. And now we have this evidence that's actually there. But the reality is that this doesn't change anything. Like my opinion is that honestly, this isn't really that big of a deal. I get what my issue is really is the systematic thing, but Tim Peel himself as a referee is not, the guy isn't a bad ref.
He's not the guy that you got to be mad at.
He's not any worse than any of the other refs in the league are. The reality is that makeup calls were just a thing that were clearly an established systemic thing that officials were taught to officiate these games when their career in the NHL began.
Yeah.
The only problem is that Tim Peel, like you said, he fell on the sword. He got caught in a hot mic, proving that theory that fans have had before.
And truth be told, the thing that pisses me off about the whole Tim Peel thing is he wasn't even set to retire at the end of the season. He was set to retire on April 24th. So 3 weeks from now. So I get why the NHL felt like they had to fire him, because they had to make an example of it and kind of show refs, okay, you can't be doing this. You can't be speaking up about this or you're going to be in trouble. But for a guy like Tim Peel, and say what you want about him as a referee and how he's been over the course of his career, but he's one of the longest tenured refs in the NHL. Mm-hmm. That seemed a little greasy to not even let him finish out his last 2-3 weeks. They just pretty much tainted the end of his career because of something that every ref does. I don't know. That seems a little bit unfair to me.
Yeah, but you know what? The thing is the NHL had no choice but to fire him, because if you let a comment like that go public and then don't do anything about it and let him officiate, even though it's only a few more games in his career until he retires, but you're still letting this guy officiate hockey games, people are going to be all up in arms about the cahoots between the NHL and the NHL officials. And you can't allow, once it's become public knowledge that a certain ref may or may not be dirty, whether or not he's more dirty than other refs, I disagree with. But now Tim Peel has been tainted, and the reality is that he's not tainted by being fired, but he was tainted by this hot mic incident, and that wasn't necessarily his fault. Maybe he should have been a little bit more diligent with his mic and what he was saying on the ice. But you know what? The NHL had no choice but to fire him, because if something like this happens, your hands are tied. You have to let a guy go. Yeah. You can't be letting this guy call games anymore after fans are already up in arms about him, right? So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's I get why they did it. You have to make an example out of him, and you have to show refs and show the fans that you're taking action. But I kind of feel bad for him, because it's just a shitty way to go out, and it's for something, like I said, that it's not just a Tim Peel thing. It's an every referee thing. And the other thing too, is apparently the only reason that his mic was picked up is because whoever was in the truck where all the production happens, where they monitor all the audio levels of everyone that's mic'd and everything. Apparently, one of the audio engineers in the truck, he faded up Tim Peel's mic. He was just testing his audio levels, and he didn't realize that the NHL hadn't gone into commercial break yet. Like, it was right before they went into commercial break, and that's why Tim Peel was caught. So it's not like he knew his mic was hot. Like, it was someone else did it, and it's just a shitty set of circumstances. And there's other, I don't know if you noticed, but a couple nights ago I think it was either the Leafs and the Flames or the Leafs and the Oilers, one of the last couple games, it was after the whole Tim Peel thing broke. Wayne Simmons went up to one of the referees to ask them, like, to question why something on him wasn't called. And if you notice, if you look closely, the ref went and subtly covered his mic while he was talking to Simmons. So the book's out now. Everyone knows that that there's some sort of systematic issue with the way they're being taught how to call games, and the refs are aware that they're on the hot seat now, so they're taking the extra precautions. And it's pretty stupid because, like I said, I think refs should just embrace the human error and call games by the rule book. If you miss a call, you miss a call. Fuck it. Don't try and even it out just for the purpose of evening it out and making it fair. Because while you think that you're making it fair for one team, you're fucking over the other team in the process. So
yeah, I agree. And like what I want to see now is, yes, they fired Tim Peel, but if the NHL thinks that they're fooling us by saying that they got rid of their one like dirty ref and now everything's fine and dandy, they're full of fucking shit. Because the NHL it's very clear that this is like a top-down issue with the NHL officiating, and they need to do some actual big overhauls of this officiating system, because it's very evident, like you said, from that clip of the ref covering his mic and stuff. There's stuff going on amongst the refs and between the refs and the players on the ice that we're not aware of as a third party watching this on television. And they need to make it a little bit more open and understood, and call the game by the book, because the reality is that teams play different styles of play. Like the fact that how many games do you say were called where it was like an even number of penalties between teams?
It was over a span of 5 days. It was like not this past Saturday, but the Saturday before, and then the Tuesday after that. And honestly, I don't know this, so don't quote me on this, but if you were to go and do the same experiment on the past 5 days, I guarantee you'll find something similar to the same results. It's either going to be even penalties or a spread of like one team has 6, one team has 4, or one team has 6, one team has 5, something like that. Because what he said is that over that span of 5 days where he checked out the amount of penalties called in each game, I think there were like one or two games where the spread was more than 1, which is fucked. Like, you shouldn't be seeing trends that consistent, especially like you said, when teams play different game styles. If you're a Boston Bruins fan, you're fucking laughing in the streets right now. Exactly. Because you play a game like Boston and they're loaded with guys that love to hit. That's just the way they've been forever. And Boston goes out there and they play their style of game, and they know that the refs will be making makeup calls for whoever they're playing. Like, it really doesn't matter anymore. Like, you think you would see a league where
another thing too is that I wanted to point out too is the difference and the discrepancy when they start to transition into playoff hockey too. So like you'll see, like, very rarely do you see the fact that the NHL hockey games are called differently in the regular season than they are in the playoffs is another kind of indication that the rule book isn't always looked at in the same light from ref to ref and from game to game, right? So when the NHL transitioned to playoff hockey, they kind of like sit back a little bit and let the players play a little more. But that just goes to show that the rule book, in the eyes of the officials, is something that can be altered and played with and looked at from a different light and from a different perspective that makes them call the game differently. But I think that every single hockey game should just be called in the exact same by the same rules and through the same eyes. I know that's impossible because there's human error and everything, but when it comes to like the fact that like the games are called differently depending on like the situation during the season, that just goes to show that the NHL rulebook has a lot more holes and is a lot more like flexible and flimsy than we think. So I think the NHL needs to tighten that up, and they need to start teaching their refs to ref from a different perspective and with a different strategy. And that needs to be sort of like a top-down sort of systematic change, because this is evident that it's not just Tim Peel's fault, and this is more, it's deeper rooted than that, and it's been going on for years.
It is, and yeah, like the point that I was just making there before I got interrupted. Especially like I said, if you're a team like the Boston Bruins and you play a naturally physical game, and you play let's say you play a team who is low physicality, high skill, like Toronto. Why not use Toronto in this example? Like, you would think that Boston would get more penalties than the Leafs because Boston plays harder. They throw the body a little more. And I'm not using the Leafs just because it's a soft spot for me, because they've played in the playoffs all these past few years. And now we're seeing maybe why there was a gap in penalties. But any other team that has more high skilled players and physical players, Edmonton, for example, like you play a team like Edmonton, Boston should have more penalties. But when every time they play, they've got the same amounts, or at least close to the same amount, it's kind of telling.
And it's a disadvantage for the higher skilled team, because then the physical team knows that they can go out there and they're probably going to get called a little bit in their favor, right? Like, they can take some hacks at Connor McDavid and then trip him up, but then maybe afterwards, like, it'll look like a bit of an embellishment, and then it'll be a soft call maybe, and then later on they'll call Edmonton on another soft call to even things up. But in reality, Boston just knows that they have that, like, slight advantage from the officials' perspective.
And that's why I said, if you're a Bruins fan, you're loving this, because you know that you're going to end up with an even amount of power plays and penalties, regardless of who you play.
Exactly.
And you know what? Just to allude to my point a little earlier, remember how we were talking about that spread of 4 or 5 days, last week? And I'm doing a little experiment myself right now. I'm actually checking the games from Sunday night, and so far it's lining up. So, New York Rangers and Washington Capitals, they played on Sunday. Capitals had 4 penalties. Rangers had 3. Columbus Blue Jackets and Detroit Red Wings played on Sunday. Both had 2 penalties. Anaheim Ducks and St. Louis Blues played. This is one of the rare ones. Anaheim had 3 power plays. St. Louis had 2.
But that's still not that big of a difference. Like, no, 3 and 2.
Exactly. Yeah, like 3-1. Like, that's nothing. And if you move on here, Devils and Bruins. I can't wait to see the results of this one. Sorry, my computer moves at the speed of a Windows 98. Look at that. 4 penalties each. Devils and Bruins.
Yeah, like, I mean, I didn't watch that game, but you're bullshitting me if you're telling me that the Devils played as physical of a game as the Bruins did.
No, exactly. And then you've got another one here, Florida Panthers and Dallas Stars. Okay, so I think there were a couple of fights in this game, but either way, Florida had 13 penalty minutes. Stars had 15 penalty minutes. Like, you're seeing a trend here, right? Like, almost every single game except for that one between Anaheim and St. Louis, the penalties are either even or off by 1.
Yeah.
So it's a telling fact. It's something the NHL, I think, needs to do a formal investigation into. They need to take a deep look at how they're training refs, because, like you said, it's definitely a systematic thing. So they got to take a deep look at how they're training refs and how they're telling them to call the games. And tell them, don't fucking make it even. Just call it by the rule book. If you see a cross check, call a cross check. If you see a trip, call a trip. If you see something that was a little weak and probably didn't really hinder the play at all, don't call it. Don't call it just to make a bad call you made earlier. Like, all you're doing is fucking over the other team. Like,
exactly.
Unbelievable.
All right. So moving on, there was one other topic that you wanted to touch on a little bit. The Philadelphia Flyers and Carter Hart.
Yes.
Recently, I'll just start off by saying recently Carter Hart, it was announced by Alain Vigneault, the head coach of the Philadelphia Flyers, that Carter Hart was going to be benched for the next 2 games based on his very poor play of late. What do you have to say about that?
So I saw a couple of people that were upset about Vigneault's decision to bench Carter Hart. And to clarify, he wasn't just saying Hart's not starting the next 2 games. He's full on scratching him over the next 2 games. So he's not even going to address it.
He's in the press box, yeah.
And I saw a couple of people that were upset about this. And they were saying, if you do that, that's detrimental to a young goalie's mental state. Like, you're basically throwing a young, bright, up-and-coming goalie under the bus. And he should sit down and work with him instead of just scratching him. And I disagree with that, because I think there is an element of sitting down and working with him. Because if you're Carter Hart, you got to acknowledge that you have not had a good season at all. Like, you can make, you know what? I'm a goalie apologist. I feel bad. I don't like ripping on goalies solely for bad play, because I know a lot of the time a goalie statistics are only as good as what the team in front of him does. And I'm sure you're appreciating hearing this.
I'm the biggest goalie apologist that there is.
Exactly. Now, having said that, you look at Carter Hart's stats this year. His record's okay, 8-9-3, goals against average of 404, save percentage of 869. Those are like AHL. Like he should be in the AHL at this point based on the way
404, a goals against average of 404. He was over the past 3 games, he led in 6, 4, and 5 goals.
Yeah.
The New York Rangers have just been picking Carter Hart apart in the past week. And yeah, like the guy, it just looks like the guy just can't even stop a puck at this point. Like he's a young guy. His confidence is shaken. I like the move, to be honest, to scratch him, because like, look, you gotta look at the guy and be like, look, okay, we've got our young future franchise goalie right in front of us here. Don't get me wrong, this has no impact on the way I view Carter Hart and the way I view his career trajectory playing out in the future, because I still think Carter Hart is going to be one of the best goalies in the league someday. But you know what? Young goalies like this, they falter sometimes, and you have to be able to sort of adapt to that. And Alain Vigneault is not saying Carter Hart is no longer my guy. He's saying he needs to take a step back, watch some tape, figure out what's wrong, gain his confidence back. And what he's going to do, he's not going to sit him down in the locker room and just fucking yell at him. Yeah. He's going to sit him down. He's going to be like, okay, look, buddy, let's figure out what's going on here. All right. Like you're not playing great. We're not playing great. Let's sit down together and figure out what's going to happen here, because you still have my full confidence as our starting goaltender. That's what he's going to say to him. And that's going to help him gain his confidence and help him take a step back and figure out what he needs to do to fix his game.
Exactly. Like they're sitting him down like that because he is the guy, not because he's not the guy. Like for a guy like Carter Hart, he's only like 22, 23 years old, somewhere in that range. So he's still a young guy, and goalies generally, it's very rare you'll find a goalie at that age who's just above all. Like usually goalies hit their peak at 25, 26, 27. So Carter Hart's still got lots of time to grow. And the reality is, in a guy in his situation where you got to imagine his confidence is absolute shit, they're taking an opportunity where they know that they're not necessarily like they're kind of in the hunt for the playoffs, I guess, but more or less they're near the bottom of the division. So for the Flyers to sit him down and say, listen, like you said, sit him down and say, listen, you're our guy. You need to watch some film. We got to reevaluate the way you're practicing. We got to reevaluate the way that you're taking these plays and everything. It's the way to do it, because people are saying that by scratching Carter Hart, it could be detrimental to not his mental health, but detrimental to like him as a goalie, because people think that they're doing that. They're just throwing a young goalie under the bus, but that's not the case at all. By sitting him, you're trying to get him back to where you know that he can be. Because at this point, I think it would be more detrimental to his mental health to keep throwing him out there in games when you know he's going to keep giving up 4, 5, 6 goals a night. So they're trying to get that to stop. And I think that's the right move, because we saw Carter Hart last year and he was great. Shout outs to fellow pump take analyst Cale Meyer on his Vezina prediction this year.
Freezing cold.
Sorry, buddy.
Carter Hart take. Hey, I didn't think it was that bad at the time, but
no, that would have been a good pick to make at the start, because he's one of the best young goalies in the league. But as of now, like, yeah, they got to do something. They got to take some extra time just to make sure that he can get back to where he can be, because he's the goalie of the future for the Flyers. And I think they'd rather have him at that point where he was last year than have him where he is now and throwing up 4, 5, 6 goals a game.
Agreed. I don't think they're shaking his confidence at all. I think they're trying to help him gain it back, and that's important, because I can tell you from a goalie's perspective that the best way to get a goalie to gain his confidence back is not to just keep throwing him out there into a barrage of pucks that he's like can't stop. So the best way to do that is just sit him down, help him figure out the problem, help him gain his confidence back that way, and then put him out there when he's ready to go. And
I'm sure I would share the same sentiment if I was a goalie.
Yeah, and then he'll get his confidence back by improving his play on the ice, and that's the only way to do it. And he's not going to improve his play on the ice if you keep playing him every night. So I like the move, and I think that people that don't like the move are looking at it from the wrong light.
Wrong perspective.
All right, so let's wrap it up by giving our ratings for the Innocent Gun this week. I'm going to start off. Yeah, you haven't tasted it before, so I want to hear what you have to say.
Okay. Well, like I said at the start of the episode, not typically an ale guy, but I have been very pleasantly surprised with this beer. It's definitely one I consider myself buying a 6-pack of, for sure. I'm not sure if I'd sit back and dummy a 2-4 of it, but I would definitely call it a pleasant surprise. So my rating, I'll give it a 7. I think it's a good 7 out of 10.
Yeah. All right. This isn't a dummyable beer, obviously. It's a treat. It's like a rich, like good, like solid tasting like ale. So this is something that you wouldn't buy in a 2-4. You would buy like a few of them and then enjoy them throughout the night or throughout a few nights, the weekend or whatever. But I'm rating this a 9 out of 10 because it's one of my favorite beers of all time. First time I ever tried this was out in BC. And I've never looked back since. It's been one of my favorites. My dad buys it all the time too. So that's sort of increased my availability of the Innocent Gun anyway. And I think you can just really taste like the Scotch in it, to be honest. Like,
yeah.
you get the ale, the regular ale rich flavor, but you also get a little twist of like Scotch flavor, which is like really unique in a beer. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's one of my favorites. So I'm giving it a 9 out of 10.
Yeah. And I think the little hint of Scotch taste in there is all you need. Like, I feel like if it was half Scotch tasting, half ale tasting,
well, no,
it'd be good. But just the little touch of Scotch in there makes
you don't want to feel like you're drinking liquor when you're drinking a beer. Anyway, all right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. Let us know what you think about the Tim Peel scandal, and tune in next week for some more Pump Take Hockey content. Thanks a lot.